Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildebrandt. That fine gentleman over there, you know him well, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, welcome back. Preview season rolls on today with the SEC. How are you?
I'm Ty. What's better than preview season? You
Nothing.
can only be wrong during preview season. So you can just take some chances, right? Nobody knows specifics at this point. So you can just throw things out into the ether and, you know, maybe a truth fly, a truth mosquito latches onto one of them and you feel good about yourself. I don't know where this analogy is going, but I love this time of year. Ty, what's better than this? The
Absolutely
anticipation.
nothing. Are you saying right here, right now, you're going to go Vandy, Mississippi State SEC championship? Speak from the chest. It's
I'm sorry,
okay.
are you not? Is that something you're not leaning into? I think that's one of the more obvious takes at this point, Ty. That's just like the trendy hipster take that everybody's latching onto. So, no, I don't think I'm there quite yet. But I can, Ty, you can be quite persuasive. So, you know, throw it at me.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens when we get there. We are previewing the SEC today. If you're listening to the show, if you're new to the show, make sure you hit subscribe or follow. We've done, I guess now with this episode, all of the Power 5 conferences. Next episode, we're going to talk about Notre Dame plus a bunch of the G5 conferences just from a higher level. Give you, again, points of fascination, things that you should be interested in for this upcoming college football season. As an important reminder, verballers.com is our Patreon. That's where you can play our first game that we're announcing. We've got a couple. Grand total. You have to go through all 69 Power 5 teams, yeah?
Yeah, I've got the power. Yeah.
All 69 Power 5 teams. You give us the over, under. We give you the win total. At the end, the winner gets a Solid Verbal prize pack. We've got other games forthcoming. We've got other perks forthcoming out at verballers.com. But we're excited to build that community out as the season gets awfully big in the window. Dan, preview season, of course, is kind of like the first milestone on our way towards hitting that goal.
Yeah,
so
and
come on out.
The great thing about Grand Total as a game where people can pick the their over-unders, right? They're like, oh, I think Kansas is well. Oh, I think Pitt is actually. The great thing about Grand Total is it weeds out the people who are afraid to compete.
Yeah.
It weeds them out. And so I don't think people should visit verballers.com if they're not all that competitive. But if you've got the fire burning inside of you, Ty, verballers.com, Grand Total for people who love to compete, who welcome competition, who love defeating the other dum-dums in the college football universe. That's all.
Probably you and I, to be fair.
Of course.
Probably.
Of course.
You and I, to be fair. Verballers.com. Don't forget, again, to hit subscribe or follow, whether you're listening on a podcast app or watching out on YouTube. Follow along on social media. Listen, I don't want to bog down the top of this show.
Yeah, let's go.
With too much of the admin stuff because we got a lot to talk about here.
Lane Kiffin tempo. Let's go. Let's go.
We're playing tempo this year. We're doing things a little bit differently. I guess not at this point, but than we have in previous years.
My goodness. How interesting. How bizarre.
We had 23 points of fascination with the Pac-12. We had 29 items that we came to just organically. We did not script this out or plan it otherwise. In both the Big 12 and ACC, the Big 10, we had 31. I am counting these things arbitrarily using my ding.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like Around the Horn, if you're familiar with the show on ESPN. I'm just kind of counting and keeping track as best I can. 31 on the last episode with the Big 10. My hunch is that we may hit more with the SEC because this is a fascinating conference this year on about 1,000 different levels. Of course, it always is. It is, I think, perceived as the best conference in college football. So there's always a lot to talk about. I just feel like as I went through all the preview publications and did some of my own studying, there's like a lot more meat on the bone this year than I'm accustomed to with the SEC.
I agree.
And I will start with this ding of my own. The quarterback situation, man.
Yes.
The quarterback situation in the
start.
SEC is fascinating this year. The best returning quarterbacks in this order, I believe, best returning starting quarterbacks from a year ago.
Okay.
That are currently with the same team.
Proven experience
with their current team. KJ Jefferson.
Yeah. Ding.
1. Jayden Daniels, 2.
Ding.
And then
Will Rogers?
Will Rogers 3?
Well, I mean, is that crazy? I mean,
No,
I
think
don't know
that's
how
the
you feel
answer.
about Spencer Rattler. You've gone in deeper than I have. Joe Milton didn't start last year. Devin Leary didn't start last year. Graham Mertz didn't start last year for any of these teams. Depending on how you feel about the production and time of Connor Wegman, I suppose, but Will Rogers seems more proven than Connor Wegman at this point. Like, you have a better concept of Will Rogers' upside, that he was the full-time starter last year.
And on the point of Will Rogers, that I'm sure you can get to this when we talk about Mississippi State, he does have that returning experience, but now they're changing systems.
Fully new system. Yeah.
How does he fit into that? So It's KJ Jefferson. I think it's Jayden Daniels. The SEC East is a bunch of new quarterbacks and a bunch of questions at the quarterback position.
Mm-hmm.
The SEC West is obviously not void of them either. So there's a lot going on, really, when we're talking about the face of the team in 2023 in the SEC. That one, I think, is at the forefront for me. What else do you got from 30,000-foot view?
I think it's tied to that first point. I think we could get pretty chonky this fall in the SEC in terms of vintage sort of SEC man ball. Is that crazy to think about?
Man ball.
Okay, so think about where Arkansas is going, and they're going back to doing more under center, more 12 personnel, right, with a couple of different tight ends, should they have two tight ends that they feel good about. Texas A&M is probably going to be more tight endy. Certainly LSU with Brian Kelly. Now, the only thing with LSU, and we'll get into this as well, is they weren't necessarily a rushing team last year, other than Jayden Daniels, and a lot of that was scrambling. But with Alabama's question marks at quarterback, but with the experience along the line, with having, 3-4 running backs they feel good about, and Tommy Rees's own experience at Notre Dame, where you're like, let's develop big, chonky offensive linemen, run the hell out of the ball, give it to tight ends, and be efficient with it. Florida's not going to be throwing it deep all the time, and they feel good about where they are along the line and running back. Presumably, that again is your side of things right now. Auburn does not strike me as a team. They might not have the line to do so, but they're not going to be throwing the ball downfield a ton this year. So I think this could be an overwhelming. Now we'll leave Tennessee out of this conversation because that's certainly an outlier, but I think teams are going to be thinking a little chunkier this fall in the SEC, at least to start with. Like, how much does Georgia feel good about in terms of throwing the ball downfield with a young quarterback, a new old offensive coordinator, a line I think they feel good about. Wide receivers they probably feel good about, but they have the best tight end in the league. They've got great running back depth. So I think it's going to be a throwback to like pre-Loxley, pre-Joe Brady, 2011 SEC at times. Even if the formations are newer, even if the mindsets are newer and more modern, I think there's going to be a lot of chunky running.
Did you mention Alabama as part of this discussion?
I mentioned Alabama with Tommy Rees's experience at Notre Dame and, his background with Brian Kelly and developing linemen and running the hell out of the ball, a lot of running backs, a lot of tight ends, 12, 13 personnel. No, I think that's definitely a part of things with and Alabama's falling off in terms of high level receivers that I think they're going to be at the forefront of smart chunkiness. Maybe that's what I'm leaning into as a term.
Campbell's Soup, not a sponsor. Not a sponsor, could be.
It's not going to be the intellectual brutality of the best of David Shaw and Stanford, but I think it's going to be smart, fast chunkiness. How about
smart casual, like in Seinfeld. Whatever it is, Vanderbilt probably doesn't have it. I
don't know, man. They've got some. They lost their main running back, but they've got a running quarterback. We'll see. Was it Mikey Wright?
Mikey Wright's gone now.
He's Mississippi State.
AJ
That's
Swan.
Right. Yeah.
AJ Swan. It's his show. The other thing too that I think is really fascinating about the SEC, and we did this a little bit when we talked about the Big 12. I won't play the ding every time, I promise. By the way, for everyone out there who's got dogs and they're tired of hearing the sound effects, I'm simpatico. I get it, but like when we try to group these teams in tiers, obviously Georgia's at the top, and you've got a collection of teams that I think we would put in that lead pack, right? Obviously Georgia, Alabama is still there, even though Alabama probably has more questions this year than we're accustomed to it at any point in time. LSU, and then after that, it's probably A&M, probably Tennessee, and then it's a bunch of teams that I don't know what to expect from.
Yeah,
I don't know what to make of Ole Miss this season.
Oh, man.
I don't know what to make of Kentucky this season. I have a better indication of what to make of Mizzou this season, but I don't know what to make of Mississippi State. So there's so much intrigue, I think, outside of that lead pack of like 4 or 5 teams. That's what makes for an interesting conference. Even if you're not an SEC fan, that's kind of what we're here for today, to point out these fascinating things, frankly, that we don't understand, that we want to know more about, that were interesting to us when we read through all of the preview material.
And it's a lot of coaches who didn't go full prime, but are luckily in the shadow of Deion Sanders in terms of overhauling rosters, and like what Auburn did on both sides of the ball, what Arkansas did on both sides of the ball, what Ole Miss annually does on both sides of the ball, specifically this year on defense with the number of guys out, number of guys in, that it's like a 2/3 prime, I think, is a story. And that's always going to be a story, especially at the bigger schools when, you have the capability to bring in a lot of guys and to overhaul your roster quickly. The people that can afford to do so, be it via NIL, be it via visits to, get people quickly on campus. That's just going to be the new normal.
I want to structure this episode a little bit differently. I know with the Big Ten show, we started out with Michigan because Michigan won the conference. And I think we've done that in other ones as well with the Big 12. But I was hoping maybe we could go back and forth and pick the teams in order for us that we find most interesting.
So I took the West and you took the East.
Yeah. So like, for example, I want you to start with Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss might be top 3 interesting teams in college football this year. Not because I'm projecting them to win the conference or the national championship or anything like that, but quarterback derby is fascinating. You got 3 guys that are name brand that college football fans far and wide know of. Great running backs.
Yeah.
Also a good line, and then a defense that was killed with transfers, but now is bringing over presumably the Alabama scheme. Plus you've got Lane Kiffin and whatever look he was going for at SEC Media Day, kind of the like disgraced Southern lawyer look. I want you to start with Ole Miss because I read up on them. I came away with a big old shrug and a question mark. And I need to know where you stand here.
Quinshon Judkins might be the best offensive player in the league. There's a lot of guys who could be the best offensive player in the league. He is in that conversation. Zach Evans gone. And that was never, after Judkins really looked strong last year, it was clear that Zach Evans was not 1B, that it was 2. Ole Miss is fascinating because they're another one of those chunky teams that even though they play with tempo on the ground, and they bash teams on the ground, and they open up lanes for Quinshon Judkins. Once again, terrific running back. But you're right. The story of the offseason with Ole Miss, even overshadowing as many new faces are specifically on that defense and secondary, is the weirdest quarterback competition in America, arguably.
It's so weird.
So from what everybody seems to indicate, Jackson Dart has been a new guy, has really taken 2.5 steps forward, has had a great summer, has had a great spring, has turned heads, right? He's a one-man Manning passing academy. So by all accounts, he has the edge to once again start, albeit narrowly. But Spencer Sanders, who's still recovering from pretty significant offseason injury recovery, or just offseason injury, is right there. And you kind of know what you have for sure in Spencer Sanders, a dual threat. The height of him is a quarterback good enough to win a decent conference and win a lot of games, win big games, but didn't have a great year last year. Beat up, but didn't have a great year. Jackson Dart didn't have a great year last year. Was odd to see that kind of quarterback operating in a Lane Kiffin offense, that he wasn't supremely efficient, wasn't a crazy dual threat. But again, there's room for improvement. And it seems, if you were to believe reports, that he has improved. The receivers should not be as good as they've been these past couple years. Just a lot of turnover there. Jonathan Mingo was terrific there last year. So it's going to be a rushing team that takes a lot of chances on 4th down, which I like. Should be good with tempo, should be good with play action, should be creative. But really, it's a question of, can this offense score 38 points a game? Because the defense is likely going to give up like 37 with what they lost on all 3 levels, specifically the secondary. And guys going to big places just left. Now they bring in Pete Golding from Alabama. He takes over the defense.
Who's been really good. Everywhere he's been
been very
a good track record.
Alabama fans are not always the biggest fans of his, but he's no longer coaching in Tuscaloosa. but in terms of the value over a replacement, his defensive coordinator Vorp, he's certainly one of the best handful of defensive coordinators in the country. Best 10, 15, 19, 23, who knows? But I think it's a value add for Ole Miss, and it's going to have to happen quickly. They're changing their defensive scheme around from a smaller, faster defense to, again, chunkier defense, Ty. Smart chunkiness for Ole Miss on defense, but I just don't think there's enough star power. I don't think there's enough that's proven. A lot of transfers in, a lot of transfers out. I think it's all going to fall on the offensive line, Quinshon Judkins' health, and Jackson Dart's clear, dramatic development forward for Ole Miss. That's the fascinating thing. Or Spencer Sanders' health and ability to become 2021 Matt Corral.
Yeah, they've also got Walker Howard, who
and he's in there as well. Big name
transferred
recruit.
over from LSU,
Yep.
and I don't think figures to be in this race to the extent of Jackson Dart and Spencer Sanders, more of a quarterback of the future type role for him.
Mm-hmm.
However, we saw something similar at A&M last year, where there were a bunch of quarterbacks seemingly contending for that number one job, and then Connor Wegman ended up getting it by the time the season was said and done. So who knows what shape that takes on. The other really interesting thing for me with Ole Miss, over under 7.5 for those of you playing our grand total game.
Yep.
Obviously, Vegas sees something here. When we did our schedule preview, I described the schedule as equivalent to smoking near the gas pump, in that a lot can go wrong, and a lot can go wrong kind of like that.
Yeah.
Week 2 on the road at Tulane is a very interesting matchup, because Tulane's a good team with a lot
Very
back.
difficult. Yeah.
A good team with a lot back. And if they cannot get their defense in order, I believe Tulane's offense is good enough to skewer them.
Yeah.
Maybe not put up 50 points,
Right.
but good enough to give them a game in week 2. Not something that I would sleep on.
And it's when you want to get Ole Miss. It's when you want to get them with so many. I mean, look, Ole Miss does bring in, as I sort of alluded to, like, I think it's UTSA's best receiver and Zachary Franklin, and I think Louisiana Tech's best receiver. Michael Trigg is a good tight end. Like, there's firepower on this offense once again. Tulane should have a good defense, I think. And I think Michael Pratt loses a couple of significant weapons, but Tulane should be a solid team to beat if Ole Miss can. And we said it was on the road, yes?
On the road, yeah.
No, Ole Miss is definitely up there. I mean, the whole SEC West has its own very specific flavor crystals that make it fascinating.
Yeah. They're also on the road in week 4 at Alabama, on the road in week 11 at Georgia, LSU at home, Texas A&M at home. It's a very, very difficult schedule.
Yeah.
So it's understandable, even if this were a team that didn't have the losses they did on defense, didn't have the questions they do at quarterback, 7.5 makes perfect sense given the schedule. They could be significantly better and maybe not perform as well in their final record just because of who they have to play.
Certainly,
Crazy.
yeah, and it's
crazy.
Yeah, Alabama and LSU back-to-back, and then back half of the season, getting the A&M and Georgia defensive lines back-to-back. It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. Lane Kiffin has his work cut out for him this season. Who interests you the most on the SEC East side of things?
I think I'd like to stay positive if I'm gonna be the truffle hunter on this show, hunting for upside in the dirt. Give me Tennessee and the quest to be a more complete team. I don't know if that's your fascination point, the defense and how can they close the gap to holding up their end of the bargain. But that to me, Tennessee and the fire of a million Vols, that's what I'm ready for.
The fire of a million Vols.
Yeah.
Look at you. I think the defense is a bit underrated.
Okay.
Because if you look at the numbers, they were pretty good against the run. They struggled against the pass, and they were really beat up.
They were.
In the secondary. This year, they're healthy and they're back. The linebacking position is the area where I'm most concerned with because of newness.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be fine up front, even though they lose Byron Young, who was, an all-conference guy, had a bunch of sacks. They were good last year against the run. They really, truly were. And I think it was last season, as it is this season, more a question of the pass defense, which I think could take a step forward. So that's not to say they're going to fully close the gap on the offense, if only because the offense is so damn good.
Right.
But I think if much like we talk about with teams like Oklahoma and USC and North Carolina, any number of teams that have these dynamic offenses, they could just be a smidge better on defense, it would make the team a lot better. I think Tennessee falls into that camp, but I think they could take a step forward because their defense wasn't that far off last year. They just had their moments, especially with respect to their passing defense. The most fascinating thing for me on the Tennessee side is going to be seeing Joe Milton back now as a full-time starter in his sixth season of college football.
Good for him.
Right? Came in with the class of 2018.
Is he leaving a dentist? What is when you spend that much time? I hope so.
Joe Milton III.
Yeah.
I mean, I like him. I like him. I didn't like him as much in his time at Michigan, but he transferred out. He transferred
best of him. Yeah.
Transferred out of Michigan after a couple seasons in 2020. And he got out at the right time, interestingly enough, because that was right around the time when Jim Harbaugh was scrapping the whole plan to go to something that was more wide open.
Yep.
And going more of the Stanford route of what has now materialized into a really good system and one that has pumped out back-to-back playoff contenders. This system, obviously, at Tennessee is much friendlier to quarterbacks. And at this point, he's 3 years into this thing. He knows the system. He was MVP of the Orange Bowl when they beat Clemson. He's a monster of a man, Dan. He's like almost 6'6". He's got a cannon for an arm. I am excited to see what he can do because most of his line up front is back. The entire backfield in Jalen Wright and Jabari Small is back. Those guys combined for over 1,600 yards and 23 touchdowns on the ground last season. The receiving core does lose Cedric Tillman, does lose Jalen Hyatt.
It does.
To be honest, I'm more concerned about Hyatt than Tillman. But beyond that, I feel like the weapons will emerge in a system like this, which is just so damn friendly to the passing game and the quarterback.
Yeah.
I am really, really pumped on that front for Joe Milton. And I feel good for him just kind of on a human level because he is not a guy who bounced around a lot. He waited around at Michigan until it was apparent that either he wasn't going to get the gig or the system wasn't going to be friendly to his skill set. Then he went over to Tennessee. He has waited patiently now behind.
Was named the starter at Tennessee.
Right, was named the starter, right? But didn't decide to go elsewhere, has been very, very patient. And in limited action last season, threw like 10 touchdowns, no interceptions, has been very solid, definitely proved to have a command of this offense. And even though there are some big names that have gone now to the pros, what remains is still Brew McCoy. You remember Brew McCoy? He's another name who's been around forever. He figures to be the number one. It just feels to me like with the weaponry that Tennessee brings back on the offensive side of the ball, that they should again be really, really good.
Yeah, Dante Thornton, I think, transferred Oregon to Tennessee, another big body at receiver who, when he was on the field at Oregon, was very promising. So hopefully he's a big play receiver for the Vols as well. Yeah.
I don't want to make too much of the fact that Alex Golesh, their former offensive coordinator, now is the head coach at USF because offensive coordinator under Josh Heupel is kind of like an understudy thing. And so Joey Halsell, who we looked at, we slacked about a little bit, definitely looks like he could run a surf shop in Southern California if he wanted to.
He was the quarterback at Jimmy Clausen's high school right before Clausen.
Yeah, like
he's a local to me.
Could run the surf shop if the coordinator thing does not work out for him.
Yeah.
He's going to be taking on some of the play calling, though not all of it, because it's just not how the Heupel system works. I don't think we'll see much of a difference on offense. If anything, we're going to see more deep balls. And that brings me to my hot take.
Uh-oh.
And I don't know if I've got the spicy thing on here. I will have to find it. My hot take with Tennessee is that they're beating Alabama again this year on the road in Tuscaloosa.
In Tuscaloosa, smoking cigars. Okay.
Yeah. And we could talk about Bama next if we're drafting interesting teams. But Bama has more questions this year on offense and on defense, maybe in the secondary, than I can remember in a long time. I don't have faith in their quarterback situation at all.
Okay.
And with the secondary being such a work in progress, or at least it feels that way from afar, knowing that Tennessee has this system, it's going to remain intact. Joe Milton can run it. He's bigger, probably stronger armed than Hendon Hooker. It just seems like that's a bad matchup for Alabama. It seems like a bad matchup for Alabama, even despite the fact that Jalen Hyatt is gone. Like some new guy will emerge, and provide that pop over the top.
Okay,
so that is my hot take, and it's a perfect segue into talking about your Alabama Crimson Tide, Dan.
Okay, so my only counterpoint with Tennessee is to assume Joe Milton continues what Hendon Hooker did last year is almost underappreciating Hendon Hooker. That until his injury, and maybe until the Georgia game, fair enough, like this guy was a legit Heisman front runner, right?
Yeah.
Like he was incredible for Tennessee. And so I understand optimism. I am optimistic about Joe Milton, but I think what you did unintentionally was like, yeah, of course Joe Milton's going to be Hendon Hooker. Like that's a friggin' tall order, man.
Well, look, that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that because Hendon Hooker had a great season last season. But what I think will be fascinating this year to that point, is this a system thing or is this a quarterback thing?
Oh, I think it's both, but yeah.
It's a little bit of both. Part of the reason why Hendon Hooker didn't get drafted higher was because all the NFL scouts said that it's a one-read system.
Right.
It's all about quick reads, and Hendon Hooker, he needs to work on his processing if he wants to be an effective NFL pro. He was also older.
Older
right?
and hurt, and yeah.
Older and hurt, and there were like things that factored in there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, is this system plug and play for another strong arm quarterback who makes the right reads right out of the gun, right out of the chute, or is this going to be the kind of thing that we will see drop off going away from Hendon Hooker? I don't know.
Alabama is fascinating. You're right about that. A couple things you're overlooking is they recruit like Alabama and now add the best players from other programs.
Right.
Okay?
We can ding that one, sure.
And so that is a nice starting place because you're like, well, they're thin at safety. They added like Caleb Downs, a 5-star. They add either the best player in the country coming out of high school, or I think it's Trey Amos, the corner that comes over from Louisiana, or like the best corner prospect in the portal. And so Alabama should be just fine in terms of depth, in terms of talent. I think it's an identity thing. I think it's an idea of teams catching up in the SEC and matching that talent on certain levels. You see what A&M did a couple of years ago with their all-time recruiting class, and what LSU is doing with both the portal and bringing in a better coach. Okay, so Brian Kelly better than what Ed Orgeron was the last couple years at LSU. Obviously, 2019 is unimpeachable for LSU. So I think there's a lot going on. And obviously, Georgia ascending to where they have gotten. I think it's foolish to look at Alabama as a team coming back to merely great and saying, yeah, Tennessee can beat them 2 years in a row. I think that's a stretch, Ty. I really do. I think Alabama has weirdly become underrated, where you have latched onto, and a lot of people have latched onto, I'm sure I have to a certain extent. It's like, well, they're bringing in Tommy Rees. What must they think about the quarterbacks on the roster? Or not Tommy Rees, but what's his name?
Tyler Buckner.
Tyler Buckner, excuse me, with Tommy Rees. Alabama and what they do schematically on offense, going back to, I think, a more efficient route where they do count on the rushing attack and tight ends and not necessarily playing with the speed they were playing with a few years ago with Sark and Loxley and Gaddis. That's fascinating to me. If it's Jalen Milroe, great. He is a rushing attack himself. He's a rushing threat himself. The receivers are good. Jermaine Burton is still there. They're good. They're just not otherworldly, dramatically insane like they were a few years ago. They're going to be very good. They have a good amount of offensive line experience that came together, an offensive line that came together nicely last year after a really sloppy performance against Texas. I think they're going to be very good on offense, and I think they're still going to be terrific on defense. Now, you bring up the linebackers. Yeah, I think it's a point of concern. Linebackers matter less when the defensive line can do what it was doing last year at times. No Will Anderson, Dallas Turner's still there. Tim Smith is super promising on the inside. There's a lot to like about a lot of pieces about Alabama's defense. Kool-Aid McKinstry's still there at cornerback, right? Opposite Trey Amos.
Right.
So I'm not crazy concerned. Now, Kevin Steele is a defensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, new old defensive coordinator for Alabama, who's going to throw a lot of weird slurves at SEC offenses. If you remember, who was the Colorado Rockies expansion team who threw the slurve? That's where I was first introduced to it. That's what Kevin Steele does. He was the one defensive coordinator who did make LSU's 2019 offense look relatively mortal. And so he comes over for Miami where it just wasn't a fit. He's going to do fun, weird things with this Alabama defense if he still has, baseball reference, his fastball as a defensive coordinator. He was going to be Maryland's defensive coordinator last year, so who knows? I'm in on Alabama. I'm in on Alabama, at least within the context of saying, it's still better than Tennessee. You give me Nick Saban versus Joe Milton, I still am going to take Nick Saban. So,
well, listen, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
My I think source of hesitation with Alabama is not the defense, because the defense is always good.
Yeah.
I'm fooling myself if I say, oh, well, the secondary has questions, therefore Tennessee is going to beat them.
Yeah.
I think my biggest point of uncertainty with Alabama is the quarterback thing. And it's not new. If you're following college football through the preseason, you kind of know where they're at. But the Tyler Buchner thing really leaves me unnerved. I think Tommy Rees is a good coordinator. I don't know if he's that good of a coordinator.
Right.
I think Tyler Buchner is very talented. I know Tyler Buchner can run, and he's very fast. And if, in fact, they're going to go the man ball route that you described at the top of the show, then that's interesting. It's interesting if it's him or if it's Jalen Milroe. Frankly, they can run that system with those guys because both of them are fleet of foot.
Right.
Where it starts to fall off a little bit for me is when we start having the conversation that we did last season, actually that we did this past spring, about Tyler Buchner. Like, he came into camp and he looks like he's a new man. Looks like the new man thing falls on deaf ears here. Okay.
Sure.
Because I saw what his throwing mechanics look like at his time at Notre Dame. And I don't think that's going to play at Alabama. I just don't. I don't think he's that gifted a passer. I don't think he's got that strong of an arm. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he got better with coaching and with better skill around him. I think that's possible. Sure. You can work around any kind of physical limitations when you've got Alabama's depth of talent. But I am just not sold on that quarterback position going up against a team like Tennessee or, frankly, Texas A&M, some other teams that we know can probably score, should be able to score in this SEC season, LSU, and thinking that they're going to be able to match serve to keep pace with some of those offenses that I know are going to play at tempo and score against whoever. I don't know. That to me is where it falls off for Alabama, and why I'm again going to go Tennessee.
Who do you think is more worried in those matchups, right? Do you think LSU is more worried about Alabama, or Alabama is more worried about LSU? I'd likely say LSU is more worried about Alabama. I'd likely say Tennessee, A&M. You know, all these teams at times either made Alabama look mortal for stretches last year with Bryce Young, or just full on beat them. And so I still am a believer in Alabama. I understand the concern, and I think the concern is justified because of the quarterback situation. There is just something about Nick Saban where you give him the benefit of the doubt, they'll figure it out, they'll find a way. They win national championships, they get to playoffs with quarterbacks who go on to do nothing else in football. Jake Coker, Blake Sims, guys like that. It might be that kind of year for Alabama, but even still, they're handing it off to Jace McClellan, right? They're handing it off to guys like that where you're just like, I think they're going to be all right. I think they're going to find a way. They're one of 4 teams, 3 teams, 2 teams who deserve a benefit of the doubt that they're going to figure it out. And when you start with those lines and that secondary, or at least that talent ceiling in the secondary, I think they're going to be fine. I really do.
Where do you want to go next? Who's interesting to you in the SEC East outside of
Tennessee? South Carolina.
Ooh.
South Kakalaki, Ty.
South Kakalaki. I like it.
They're interesting to me. Beamer ball.
8-4 last year, lost the bowl game to Notre Dame. Over under this season is 6. Let me preface this by saying I love Shane Beamer. I love Beamer ball. I love what he's done. I love the enthusiasm. He took over a 2-win team, inherited it from Will Muschamp, right? Yep. Turned him into a 7-win team in year 1 and then an 8-win team in year 2. If he improves on 8 wins this season, he should be coach of the decade, okay? Because this is a brutal schedule, and this is a team that lost a lot to the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Maybe Spencer Rattler will find that magic and become the Heisman caliber quarterback that everybody thought he could. I don't know. I don't think that's
I mean, if he wins 10 games at South Carolina, he's the next Texas coach.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. That'd be incredible. So that is not likely to me. I don't see them improving on 8 wins this season.
Okay.
So I am trying to take a optimistic view of this situation at South Carolina because we were talking about points of fascination. My point of fascination with South Carolina revolves around 3 guys in particular.
Please.
It is Spencer Rattler, it is Juice Wells, and it is their awesome recruit, Nichols Harbor, who was
very fast.
Very fast. A bit of a story.
Yeah.
This recruiting cycle, he was the number one athlete in the class. He's 6'6". He can play anywhere from wide receiver to tight end to linebacker. If you go on 24/7's website, they compare him to Kyle Pitts, which is a pretty good comparison. If I'm being honest, I would take that comparison on my team any day.
Okay.
They are basically starting over along the offensive line. They're starting over at running back and at tight end. Marshawn Lloyd transferred out. Jaheim Bell transferred out. Austin Stogner transferred back to Oklahoma. All those guys are gone via the portal.
And they lost their offensive coordinator, did they not? Marcus Satterfield. Yeah.
Marcus Satterfield is out. He went to Nebraska. I'm mixed on Marcus Satterfield as a play caller. That's a separate conversation altogether.
Okay.
But pretty much everything other than the interior defensive line is also gone via the portal or otherwise. Jordan Birch transferred up to Oregon.
Yep.
We talked about him before. They're 108th in returning production on defense. This is all a very long way of saying that I'm going to focus on those three guys because those are the real points of fascination for me to see how they do, given the fact that around them, there isn't a whole lot of support.
Right.
Around them, it feels like a pretty big reboot for South Carolina. And that is all to say that this is a difficult schedule. Only 4 true road games. They're on the road at Georgia, at Tennessee, at Missouri, and at Texas A&M. Those are not easy picnic games on the road by any stretch. They also have a game right out of the chute, a neutral sider in Charlotte against North Carolina. They also got to play teams like Clemson at the end of the year.
Of course.
They got to play Kentucky at the end of the year, which could be more of a fully formed thing by that stretch in the season. This is not an easy slate by any stretch of the imagination. We have said that now for the last 2 seasons under Shane Beamer, and he has defied us both times. If he does it again this year with what I think is a real drain on talent that maybe we haven't seen previously, you're right. He's the coach of Texas.
Yeah.
He's the coach of the New York
Michigan,
Giants.
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what else we would say about Shane Beamer at this point if he can kind of fly in the face of all that conventional wisdom and those headwinds and all of these things. But Spencer Rattler has an opportunity here to fully live up to the hype and be the dude in a way that he hasn't before because I think he has less support. Juice Wells is the number 1 wideout, and Juice Wells had a good season last year. He's going to need to have a better season this year if they want to defy these odds. And Nichols Harbor is just a freak. Mm-hmm. There's a reason he was the number 1 athlete. He can come in and contribute right away, whether they play him offensively, defensively, who knows? I would say let him play wherever he wants to because he can use the help all over the field. But the fact that they got him is a testament to the fact that Shane Beamer has built so much goodwill in the South Carolina community and really around college football with what he's done in a short period of time. I love him because he's enthusiastic. I love him by what he's done so far. I just don't see it this year.
Okay.
I don't see it. So I would not in a million years want to go over. If I'm playing grand total, if I'm not a fraidy cat out there.
That's true. Verballers.com. Yep.
If I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, I'm not going over on South Carolina. Though I am rooting for them. Heartily rooting for Shane Beamer. I love what he's done. I just don't see it this year.
All right. So I guess the only follow-up question I have is Spencer Rattler, good question mark? It was tough for the first half, 2/3 of the year last year, and all of a sudden he came alive.
He came alive when they simplified the offense.
Yeah.
And that is kind of my bone of contention with Marcus Satterfield. He had that offense a little too overcooked. And when they broke it down and made it easier for, I don't know, the guys to understand it, or the guys to just play and not think, that was when we saw the results at the end of the season. That kind of blew us out of the water. Like, they beat Clemson? What? Huh? What are we talking about here?
Yeah.
That's I think the mechanics of how that happened. I don't know if he's good. I remember thinking that Spencer Rattler was going to be a surefire number 1 overall pick back in his day at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
He's fallen off a little bit from that, but at moments, clearly he can flash, and his elusiveness back there is instrumental to this offense working because the line was not good last year, and the line needs to improve this year. So I don't know. I don't know if he's good. I think he's probably better than the stats would indicate, better than he gets credit for, if only because at least at current time of recording in early August, I don't think much of the line in front of him. I didn't last year. I don't this year. So he's going to need to do a lot with his legs to buy himself time and find open guys. Juice Wells, maybe Nichols Harbor down the field.
Yeah, Honestly, I think their schedule's okay. It's spaced out well enough.
It's spaced out, but Dan,
I know.
If you're this troubled along the line and throughout
I hear
your
you.
defense,
You're not wrong.
That's a problem. It's good that they're solid up front in the interior line. That will help in the rushing defense area. But man, there's just too many question marks for me to really feel great about it.
South Carolina last season, 127th in rushing success rate defense.
Yeah.
So maybe a good thing that those guys are no longer there and that they've cycled to new guys in that front seven. I don't know. South Carolina is really interesting to me. They just, for whatever reason, talked about this before, the Juice and Williams Bryce is very real to me. So hoping for more energy from the Gamecocks. Where do you want to go?
I'm interested in Texas A&M next.
Oh man, why?
Texas A&M. I'm interested in the two beta fish in a bowl complex between Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino with offensive play calling. I'm interested in the whole lot at A&M. I'm interested in, is this the same story that we've had for 3 years running now, where they get an incredible amount of talent and it's really a function of can they develop the guys or not?
Right.
Is it the same thing this year?
So yeah, going into the year, the fascinating thing with Texas A&M is we talk about going from bad to average to pretty good to great. I don't know how Texas A&M, but they might be able to go from bad to great, right? Especially on offense. Offense is what held them back last year, and the rush defense was atrocious. A&M is in an interesting place where they're deep along the defensive line. I think linebacker's a question. I think they'll be all right in the secondary. They've recruited well enough, although there's been some turnover there. Bringing Tony Grimes from North Carolina, for example, a former 5-star corner. And they should be able to get after the quarterback. They should be able to get off the field. DJ Durkin should be able to build and design another strong defense with the amount of experience they return because of those young guys who were forced into action as freshmen last year. And offensively, if they're healthy along the offensive line, and Connor Wegman is what he seemed to be near the end of last year, this could be at least an offense, given Bobby Petrino's history in a booth, on the field, whatever, what Connor Wegman looked like, and having one of the best handful of receivers, maybe the best receiver in the country in Evan Stewart, no Devin A-Chain, but Anaya Smith returns in his do-everything role, that there's enough offensive talent. There's enough depth on offense. There's enough money to throw at smart offensive minds.
Yeah.
Where A&M seems to be turning over every rock, and most certainly that's where they may have found Bobby Petrino. That's mean. But also,
that was mean.
I don't really care.
Appropriate.
Because I root for Texas A&M in the same way I root for teams that underperform. I'd like to see a super fun Evan Stewart, right? I'd like to see Connor Wegman come into his own and offer up another strong quarterback performance in the SEC. That would be a good thing for my eyes. But there are still a lot of question marks. And so
why is Jimbo Fisher?
Why
so
is Jimbo
skittish?
Fisher? Is that your question?
Well, why is Jimbo Fisher is his own question. But why is Jimbo Fisher so skittish about just coming out and saying, yeah, Bobby Petrino's going to call the plays?
Because Jimbo Fisher won a national championship with arguably the most prolific offense of all time in college football. And when you know what you're capable of, Ty, when you, Ty Hildenbrand, know what you're capable of, when I, Dan Rubenstein, it's hard to turn that over to somebody else. You have pride in your vision and your worldview about college football offenses. And so Jimbo Fisher obviously sees the skill on offense that he has recruited and seen at practice. And he wants to be the one. It's his pride. He wants to be the one to be that architect like he once was. And I get that. But you lose to App State. You stop scoring 20, 24 points a game last year. You have to, at some point, if you're smart and self-aware, know that something is amiss. And so he just wants to be positive, I think, in his own confidence in Bobby Petrino and Petrino's vision for play calling, what the offense can be and should be under Connor Wegman, it's at that point where he says, okay, it's his. And so I think it's hard to let go.
I get that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's football or real life.
Yeah.
He's been very successful, but it's been a while since the offense was humming.
Sure.
And I'm surprised it's taken this long for him to come to that conclusion. I'm really surprised by the comments in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really surprised that he has been so non-committal with respect to Petrino. And I'm not sold on Petrino either. I think Petrino's probably a better offensive mind at this point than Jimbo Fisher, but I don't know if that's so much a given.
Right.
He's just different. And maybe he's got a track record for a different kind of offense. But that to me is such a point of fascination, how those two interact and what the offense ends up looking like.
Sure.
Even people who cover Texas A&M aren't sure.
Yeah.
And at this point in August, I would expect more clarity. I would. We usually get more of that. But Jimbo Fisher never ceases to be interesting.
Well, I'll tell you this, Ty. Jimbo Fisher doesn't owe you anything.
No, I know.
We'll all know soon enough. Also should mention Moose Muhammad, who had a crazy impressive 2022. He should be back on the opposite side with Evan Stewart. So again, any offensive mind would love to have what Texas A&M has. The tight end depth is exceptional. It's just a matter of who has the confidence, who is the teacher, who is the game day mind to actually see results.
They've got decent buffers.
Yep.
Their over-under is 8 on the nose. And outside of the stretch where they go neutral site against Arkansas, back home against Alabama, on the road at Tennessee, it feels like they would be incredible value at 7.5, which I think is the number that we've got currently in grand total.
Yeah,
It feels like that's good value. Now they've got Miami on the road week 2. I don't know what to expect from Miami, but otherwise, they've got a tough way to close this thing out at LSU week 13. So this is not what I would call an easy schedule, but if the talent lives up to the billing, there's not more than 3 losses on this thing.
Well, I just think because 8-4 wins you an over with A&M, they do almost nothing but exclusively go 8-4. So
Right.
in their good years. So that's why I'd say it's a good bet.
Yeah. Okay. Where are we going next, Dan?
In the East, let's talk about Georgia because they're still fascinating to me because of some coaching moves, obviously with the end of Stetson Bennett. He's still alive with the end of his tenure at Georgia. That's a correction there. Yeah, I think Georgia's fascinating with the number of players over the past 2 years that have been drafted highly. Yeah, Georgia's definitely, even though they are playing a different sport than most of us or most of the teams we root for, I still think they're fascinating.
I'm not going to play the ding 4 times, but I have 4 points of fascination with Georgia.
Let's dive in.
Georgia's the 2-time defending national champion. They went 15-0 last season. Their over-under is 11.5, just to get that stuff out of the way so you know where we're coming from.
Yeah.
The first point of fascination is whether Georgia can become the first team to three-peat.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Since the 30s. Minnesota three-peated in the 30s. Now, a lot of folks have been talking in the preseason that they think that Minnesota team could take this Georgia team.
Everybody's been saying that.
I'm on the fence about that.
Well, all
personally.
your Notre Dame friends were watching that game in the stands.
I'm on the fence about that.
Yeah.
But just to put it in historical context, that's where this Georgia team's at.
Okay.
They could three-peat. They're probably the favorite to three-peat. The subheading to that is now that they've got the easiest schedule in the SEC, and it's not really even close. It just isn't.
With an Oklahoma cancellation as the asterisk, yes.
Oklahoma cancellation as the asterisk, sure. But 11.5, I would confidently bet the over. Wow. Because here is the schedule. Wow. Week 1, UT Martin. Week 2, Ball State. Week 3, South Carolina. Week 4, UAB.
Ooh.
That's 4-0.
Yeah.
Week 5 on the road at Auburn. Week 6 at home against Kentucky. Week 7 on the road at Vandy before they have a bye week. Probably 7-0. As they go into week 9, it's the neutral siter against Florida, home against Tennessee and Ole Miss, week 12 and 13 on the road at Tennessee and Georgia Tech. Even if you feel like that Tennessee game is maybe more of a crapshoot this year, I don't really feel that way, but if you do, that seems to be the best team on the schedule. They're still not going below 11 wins, which is not happening. So I am all in on Georgia going undefeated again, 12-0.
Which is the game? Where is the danger zone? Where is the trap door? Where is the snake in the toilet? I think it's at Auburn.
Not with where Auburn's at. Maybe Kentucky?
Well, first of all, we don't know where Auburn's at. This is a fully new team, new staff, everything.
Maybe I'll throw Kentucky out there. I'm actually pretty high on Kentucky.
Okay. But that's in Athens?
The game is in Athens,
Yeah.
Maybe Tennessee on the road, week 12. I don't know. After Ole Miss, maybe they're dealing with some body blow theory after playing Ole Miss.
Sure.
But it's hard for me to find the losses here. I read through this thing. I keep waiting for it to get harder, and it doesn't. Georgia is minus 500 in the betting markets to win the SEC East. Which
I'm sitting here trying to make a Viagra joke, right?
I know you are.
Yeah. Okay.
I would expect nothing less.
We'll circle
Georgia's
back
minus
at the end 500.
of the episode.
Yeah.
Minus 500, which means you got to put up 50 to win 10.
Yeah.
That's where Vegas is at. So the schedule, undeniably easy. The subheading is that Georgia also probably has the best team in college football. And it's not because of the schedule. It's a mutually exclusive point.
Yeah.
It's almost in spite of the schedule. And to that end, I think, is where we start talking about changes on offense, which is what you alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia's got a new quarterback. They've got a new old offensive coordinator. I believe that Carson Beck is going to be the starter this season. We've heard nothing but good things about him through the spring, all throughout last season too. But I think he's probably the guy. Backup last year, he's got the most experience. Seems like he's held that lead over Brock Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton the whole way through. Georgia's got really good quarterback depth. If it's not Carson Beck, or if there's an injury to Carson Beck, they've got guys clearly behind him who can come in and probably fill that role admirably. Carson Beck, by the way, 6'5", a former 5-star. He's got the physical tools that Stetson Bennett did not.
Mm-hmm.
The new coordinator is Mike Bobo. And I say new in quotes because Mike Bobo was there before. Georgia fans were not exactly thrilled when they heard Mike Bobo, but Mike Bobo is a guy who the last time he was there was scoring 41 points a game with Hudson Mason at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He took full advantage of Nick Chubb when Nick Chubb was playing running back. So I think they'll be just fine. I think they will stick to the formula of being a very, very physical team, a team that is able to run you into Bolivian, as our friend Mike Tyson would say.
Mm-hmm.
And if Carson Beck gives them a little bit more in the passing game with over-the-top stuff, with increased arm strength, with it maybe a better cast of wide receivers, then so be it. We will probably find that out a little bit later on in the season. But the ground game will again be ground zero for the project, because this is one of the best three offensive lines in America. Whether it's Dijon Edwards or Kendall Milton, they will eat. They will open up lanes for that passing game. And that's where Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas, I think, come in. They're two big-time transfer threats that came over from Missouri and Mississippi State, respectively. They've also still got Ladd McConkey, who's there for like a 15th season. And, oh, by the way, Brock Bowers.
I was going to say, what about the best tight end in the country, who has been the best tight end in the country the last 3 years?
I was building up to that point.
Yeah, okay.
Brock Bowers.
Okay.
So basically, as long as Georgia isn't a disaster at quarterback, they're going to be ridiculous on offense.
Okay.
And you already knew that because they're two-time defending champions and they recruit like crazy. But that's just where we're at. They're not going to get any worse on offense because of a change at coordinator or a quarterback.
Okay, so I'll invoke what I did with Hendon Hooker. Let's remember that Stetson Bennett was excellent for Georgia. Is he one of the greatest quarterbacks to play college football ever? He is not. Was he one of the greatest, if not the greatest Georgia quarterback ever? Yes. Is he the best Georgia quarterback of at least the modern era in the heights he took this team and the efficiency with which he played? So that's who they're replacing. That's who we're replacing, an absolute gamer that, yes, started out kind of poorly in a couple of national championships, but made it work. Or in a national championship. Last year, he was pretty good. If Carson Beck is good, Georgia will win the national championship again. Likely. If he has growing pains but shows flashes, I think they could lose a game. Not because they're less than Kentucky or Auburn. Auburn's a rivalry game on the road. Kentucky's the week after that, is it not?
No.
That's where I would be a little bit scared. 4% scared? 11% scared? Something like that. But, yeah, I think you nailed everything else. They should be fine on defense.
Defensively, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
They obviously lose some big names. Jalen Carter, Keely Ringo, Nolan Smith. Bear Alexander transferred out.
Yeah,
which
Nolan
is kind
Smith
of a
didn't play
surprise.
half of last year anyway. Yeah.
Right. But the thing with Georgia, and I talked about this last November, and I try to bring this up every chance I get, Georgia rotates guys in so much that even the guys now who are the quote unquote starters had experience last year. Even if they weren't the full-time guy,
For sure.
they just rotate so many guys through that they're never really at risk of a huge drop off on defense, unless there are catastrophic injuries and you can't plan for that type of thing. But they're so good and they're so talented and they have such a heavy rotation that they're never quite starting over at a position group. So they'll be fine. They'll be absolutely fine on defense. It'll be one of the best defenses in the country. I have questions about the offense as well. Obviously, anytime you swap out quarterbacks and coordinators, things can go sideways a little bit. I think they've mitigated the risk to this point to such a great degree that it's not really that concern, especially with the schedule. The schedule really works to their favor.
No Kent State this year, Ty.
No Kent State.
Nothing to worry about. No
Nothing to worry
Kent
about.
State scares.
Yeah. So look, I don't want to pan Georgia and just say, I will pencil them into the title game in the playoff again. But
Right.
I kind of feel that way. It's boring. It's boring. It's like a great golfer.
Yeah.
Great golfers are regimented. And the reason that they're great is because they avoid the boneheaded stuff. They make par instead of double bogey.
Sure.
Georgia's just good at that now. They're good at that now. And they're not going to go out there and do the boneheaded thing. Kirby Smart has kind of just bred that out of them
Yeah.
at this point. And with the talent they've got and the roster in front of them and schedule in front of them, excuse me, I have no reason to think they're not hitting that over of 11.5, going 12-0 and going back to the playoff.
Man, I just think college football is hard. And I understand what Georgia's done the past couple years. But like we had this conversation about USC in like 2007. There has never been a defense as deep with 5. They lose to Jaquiz Rogers, right?
No.
Like it's a weird sport. And so like I bake weirdness into Georgia, into Ohio State, Ohio State losing to Iowa. Like I kind of want to bake that in, which is why I don't love taking an over that can only hit going 12-0.
Let's go to LSU.
Yeah.
Is Jayden Daniels the surefire starting quarterback over Garrett Nussmeier?
Yes. All right, next team.
Next team. What interests you the most about LSU?
Masons. How about Masons? Mason Smith on defense returns in the middle of a defense that could have used him for most of last year, certainly the first half of last year, as LSU's defense did get better. But they were not especially deep at defensive tackle, and they've hit the portal once again. Mason Smith is great. Mason Taylor, you remember, previously on Mason Taylor, he caught the pass that beat Alabama. Right. But this has not been an LSU team that, by and large, has utilized tight ends like Brian Kelly likes to utilize tight ends. And Mason Smith, now coupled with Malik Neighbors being back, a lot of youthful promise at receiver, offers Jayden Daniels something he likes, and that is short to intermediate passes. And so I think that's going to be not the bread and butter of Mike Denbrock's offense at LSU, but a healthy central element of the offense, an offense that struggled to run the ball consistently with running backs, that doesn't have what I think to be true star power at running back. We'll see. Happy to be proven wrong. But to me, it's the most fascinating thing about LSU moving forward, because I think their defense is going to be quite good.
No.
I think it's the old, like, take a chance, take a chance, take a chance, take a chance. Like the old ABBA, take a chance song. Gotta throw the ball. You know, Jayden Daniels was so safe last year. You gotta make teams pay for stacking the box, for keeping safeties closer and closer to the box. And so that's where LSU really needs to take that next step. To be a more complete offense, to me, is the most fascinating thing about LSU, because I think after a year where they struggled a bit along the offensive line but got better and looked like the future is super bright up front on offense, they need to take full advantage of the width and length of the field. And that, to me, is everything for LSU. As, look, they won the West last year. It's a little bit of nitpicking, but with who they face this year and the angry defensive lines they face, I think we need to see a more complete Jayden Daniels experience, because, as you alluded to, Garrett Nussmeier can throw the ball, is enthusiastic and confident in throwing the ball downfield. Should he be all of the time? Perhaps not. A little bit sloppy.
Sure.
But by and large, you know, if that's something that LSU wants out of their offense, that Garrett Nussmeier is happy to oblige. Jayden Daniels, very, very good. Had some down moments last year, but again, the Jayden Daniels story is one of a quarterback good enough to beat anybody in this conference, including Georgia. Good enough. That doesn't mean he can't, but like, you know what I'm saying. So if we get that element of LSU's offense, we're now talking about an SEC champion potential ceiling for LSU, because I think they're going to smother teams on defense, even with losing guys like BJ Ojolari up front, sack machines. We've gone all this time without mentioning Harold Perkins,
our guy,
the most fascinating, dangerous defensive player in college football. So when you include those players as wearing your uniform, LSU is in a wonderful place. And what he accounts for and what he can cover for on an LSU defense that now adds like Oregon State's best linebacker and Omar Spates, it's pretty great. It's pretty great.
This. I don't want to keep playing it, overplaying it.
It's
but
okay.
Anytime we bring up Harry Perky, I mean, come on. We have to.
He's stupid good.
Here's my question for you now.
Yeah.
You did the preview, the deep dive for both LSU and Florida State.
Yeah.
And LSU, Florida State is the big game of week one.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what Fox would tell you about Colorado, TCU, I think it's LSU, FSU.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what you know, which of these two teams do you favor in that game? Who would you pick?
I'd give slight edge to Florida State. Slight edge. I think the best of Jordan Travis is a little bit more interesting. I think their offensive skill is a little bit more interesting in this moment. But, man, I don't know. I think LSU has a better chance, or I think LSU has a good chance to win this game on a neutral field in week 8. I think Florida State is better built to win it in week 1, especially since it's in Orlando.
I think that's a fair vantage point. LSU's over-under, by the way, is 9.5. There are tough teams in the schedule outside of the FSU week 1 game. That's a legitimately awesome matchup in week 1. I'm so glad we get it. But weirdly, it does not feel like that tough of a schedule to me. You know, going to Bama will be challenging. You're not going to be in the SEC West and come out of this thing without a tough road game here and there. But otherwise, the true road games are Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Mizzou, which feels manageable. The rest of this thing is at home. And obviously, the Florida State game is neutral site in Orlando. There will be a strong Florida State contingent there, but LSU travels well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I've got LSU in my SEC title game again. I've got them winning the West and going up and losing against Georgia, just like they did last year. But I could obviously be talked off that. I'm not I'm not as confident in LSU as I am in Georgia, but it feels like with what they've got coming back and knowing that they did that in year 1 under Brian Kelly, the team's only gotten better.
Yep.
They haven't gotten worse. So that leaves me feeling very optimistic about their chances of getting back to Atlanta.
Yeah, and we saw that depth, especially on defense, tested last year, where Brian Kelly had to overhaul everything via the portal, and by the end of last year, you know, Texas A&M decided finally to just give the ball to Devin Achane 73 times in that game. It felt like it, and LSU got stomped. And so I think they have the depth to make up for some of those deficiencies that they saw last year. So I think, look, next year might even be more special for LSU, but as it stands now with Jayden Daniels' experience and what they returned successfully from last year and the young guys who got that experience, they're in great shape.
My turn to go back to the East.
Please.
What interests you?
You mentioned a Kentucky moment there, so let's talk Kentucky.
Man. Kentucky's over under 7. They were 7-5 last year. They got shut out 21-0 in the bowl game to Iowa. Remember that one?
Yep.
Oh my God. I still can't believe that happened, that game. Kentucky was an enigma last season because the offense had these incredible heights with Liam Cohen in 21. And last year kind of bottomed out. They were really bad on offense. And a lot stemmed from the offensive line, which didn't get push.
No.
And also was playing a lot of guys out of position. Was a different offensive coordinator because Liam Cohen went to the NFL. Now Liam Cohen is back. And he comes back at a great time because basically nobody on the Kentucky offense last year had a good season. Not Will Levis, not any of the running backs. The defense, for its part, was really banged up and still one of the better defensive units in college football. I think they were 4th in the SP+. something like that. Brad White did a great job with that defense. So now, for me, the fascination, it's Liam and Leary, Dan.
Liam and Larry. Yep.
Liam and Leary. It is the law firm of Liam and Leary this season. Liam Cohen is back from the NFL. Devin Leary transfers over from NC State. You could argue that Liam Cohen's system was the reason for all the ridiculous hype around Will Levis. So I love the fact that now he comes back with another solid quarterback in Devin Leary, who I wanted Notre Dame to get before Sam Hartman was an option.
Yeah.
Now it's like, who's Devin Leary? I don't care about him. We got Sam, my man.
We got Sam Hartman wearing bones of his own body around his neck.
The bone collector, Sam Hartman.
Yeah.
We can talk about that on the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Love the aggressiveness. Talk about an attacking mentality. Putting your own bones around your... What a weirdo. Yeah. Anyway, you know where I stand on Devin Leary. I loved him before. I didn't love him as much because I didn't know Sam Hartman was an option. But I'm really high on Leary as a quarterback. I would love to see them turn Tavian Robinson into this year's Wan'Dale Robinson, the way they did a couple years ago. I thought Tavian Robinson was going to be that guy last year, but the whole thing kind of collapsed. That was the idea last season. It didn't obviously materialize. I think this offense, part of the reason why I'm pretty excited about it is that it probably is going to be more pass heavy than we're used to from Kentucky, because it may take them a little bit to sort out their offensive line. We are used to seeing Kentucky be very physical up front. They've done a good job building that line. They've done a good job running the football. And that has kind of unlocked the other elements of the offense. I think that will take a little bit of time to get sorted out. Even though they brought up, a good transfer running back from Vanderbilt, even though they've got Ray Davis, who ran for 1,000 yards, I just think the line thing, the project up front, will take some time to kind of get sorted out. They're moving guys back into what they feel is their rightful position this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get out over my skis because of that, but I think that will give Devin Leary and Liam Cohen a chance to shine in the passing game. And the defense is going to be tough again. It seems like Mark Stoops has gotten this thing to a place now where it's steady. The last 5 years, it's been top 15 in the country. Last season, as I said earlier, all the way up to 4th, even with injuries. And they had a lot of them on the defensive side of the ball. So the team is good. The team is solid. The team's in a good spot. The over-under, again, is 7, which feels low. The schedule is tailor-made to break in a new quarterback and Liam Cohen, another new old coordinator situation in the SEC East, and a lousy offensive line. They've got Ball State, they've got Eastern Kentucky, Akron, and Vanderbilt to open things up. You keep reading it, though, and that's when it's like, did they get duped into signing on to this?
Right.
Did they really mean to do this? Because they've got Florida on the road, they've got Georgia, those games back-to-back. There's a closing stretch of Tennessee at Mississippi State, Alabama at South Carolina, at Louisville for the Governor's Cup. So it picks up steam. It's like, it's Scotland or somewhere over in the UK where they chase the big wheel of cheese down this very steep hill.
Oh, yeah. I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Look that up. It's one of those deals for the Kentucky schedule, because you start building momentum and suddenly it's like you got to keep your feet moving. Otherwise, the whole thing is just going to start tumbling out of control. I'm very excited about the offense. I'm very excited about Liam Cohen coming back. I think they've got a lot back to be excited about where it counts. My only real questions about this team are up front with the line and how long it takes them to get the whole run game integrated to make this thing feel like it's cohesive. But it's in front of Kentucky, and I am a betting man. I probably will go over on those 7 wins just because it feels to me like there's value there. Even though it's a tough schedule, there's a lot of value to be had because these are good players and good coaches, and I don't think they're going to be down for 2 years in a row on offense.
The Cooper's Hill Cheese Run and Wake in Gloucester.
Yeah.
That's all I have for you. That's what I found. I think I like Kentucky. The combination of quarterback and defense, Devin Leary didn't throw deep a ton at NC State when he was succeeding. And so if you add in creativity and a promising receiving core and hopefully an improved offensive line, schedule's just brutal, man.
The schedule is tough. But that's why I like the fact that it starts slow.
Sure.
it gives them a chance to kind of break this thing in.
Okay.
And figure it out. And Liam Cohen was a revelation the first time around.
I know.
He was. He was the reason that Will Levis was a number 1 overall pick.
Or was it Wandale Cohen, right?
Probably was Wandale.
Yeah.
But Will Levis had a revelation in his one season. And you remember we had Nate Tice on, and they were talking him up as maybe the first overall pick, a first-round draft pick. And then he wasn't good. Suddenly he wasn't good.
Yeah.
When Liam Cohen
was hurt.
So.
Offensive line got worse. Receivers got worse. There's a lot to, process about
it's
what
nuanced,
happened,
but I'm very bullish on Kentucky. I'm going over that 7.
They're a good team.
Let's go back over to the West, Dan. I want to talk about...
You want Arkansas, Mississippi State? I think that's everybody I have left.
Arkansas Razorbacks.
And Auburn, yeah.
Arkansas also over under of 7.
Mm-hmm.
They have a crazy stretch of games.
Yes.
From week 4 through week 7. When they go to LSU, to a neutral site game against Texas A&M, to Ole Miss, and to Alabama to round things out. Talk about a 4-week stretch.
Yeah. Well,
that's fettuccine Alfredo.
And Mississippi State in there as well, who might be really good on defense, if not both sides of the ball. We'll see on Mississippi State. So it could be a 4-game stretch of Rooney. Could be 5. They're tough. Obviously, with the sudden tragic loss of Mike Leach and Zach Arnett being thrown into the mix as the new head coach, he makes the changes he makes, especially on offense with bringing in Kevin Barbay from App State. If that's how you pronounce it, I apologize if I got that wrong. They're going to be a lot less air raid. They're going to be a lot more conventional. I don't say that in a bad way, but things are shifting on offense. Will Rogers, of course, has by and large thrived as an air raid quarterback, helping to develop a number of really impressive receivers. Jaden Wally, I don't know if you have the sound at the ready. He is back once again. They lose Ra Thomas, who you mentioned is now at Georgia. Offensive line is good, but sometimes it's tough to evaluate air raid offensive lines because the ball's coming out so quickly and they're not running the ball in what we understand to be a conventional way of running the ball in 2023. So I'm hopeful that they will remain solid. The big thing is on defense with who they return, Bookie Watson being one of the best linebackers in the country in the middle. They should be very, very strong up front on defense. The secondary is going to look different, but quarterback and defense as a starting place, given the turmoil internally, and I don't mean that in a negative way like that. It was just you lose your head coach all of a sudden to such a tragic circumstance with Mike Leach and having the heart attack and passing away. You're just like, that's horrific for a program. And so it's what are they going to look like on the field? What is the plan? What is the vision? As they transition, we talked about this, which I think is a far more dramatic example with Georgia Tech moving away from a scheme that they played for so long. I think the continuity at quarterback and receiver and offensive line, I think, is going to make this a little bit more seamless. But App State didn't have an incredible offense last year. It's not like they're bringing in the hottest coordinator name. They wanted to be more balanced. Zach Arnett is going to continue. He promotes from within a defensive coordinator. So to me, it's just a transition thing on offense. That's the fascinating thing about Mississippi State in an extremely unusual circumstance in college football with a coach passing away like Mike Leach did.
So first off,
I gave you the time. I was vamping to buy you time to get the sound.
I appreciate that. Secondly, my point of fascination.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it. I requested Arkansas and you did Mississippi State.
Did I really? I totally glossed over.
You did it. That was a pro transition I didn't realize until you started talking about Zach Arnett.
My mind was on Mississippi State.
It's
I apologize.
All right. You did admirably.
Yeah.
You did admirably. We can talk about Arkansas next.
That's incredible. I apologize. I am a doof.
6.5 over under for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Obviously very challenging circumstances that this team is rebounding from. I think Zach Arnett was a good choice to continue the continuity of that program. This is a program that we've been generally pretty high on the last couple of years. Anytime you switch away from one system to another, that's when things can get very interesting and go very sideways. You are right to point out that it is not Georgia Tech. It is not that drastic a situation.
Right.
But the air raid in its own right requires different kinds of personnel. One of the things that comes up a lot when you read about the system that they're trying to move towards, the tight end. Tight end has not really been an area of focus for Mississippi State.
No.
They were not used to running with that type of personnel. It'll take a bit to try and develop that and get that more balanced mentality firing on all cylinders. But, I root for Zach Arnett. I root for Mississippi State in year one.
It's been a fun defense to watch, especially these past, maybe 2 of the last 3 years, 3 of the last 4 years. Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, if you're a Mississippi State fan, you get LSU at home. You get Alabama at home. You get Kentucky and Ole Miss at home. You also get Arizona at home in week 2, which is a game that I know I've been calling out a lot of these week 2 games because some of the matchups are really fun for SEC teams. Mississippi State, week 2 against Arizona, I think is not a game that anybody should overlook because Arizona is pretty set in its ways on the offensive side of things. We know they can score. I think Mississippi State, regardless of the system, they'll be able to score in Arizona, but Arizona will be upset-minded. And if Mississippi State is trying some new things that they're not fully comfortable with, that's potentially an upset.
Okay.
Potentially.
I don't know who's playing defense for Arizona to stop.
Nobody.
But okay.
No. But they can score, and we know they can score.
But no, it's an interesting schedule. Where's the Egg Bowl this year?
Egg Bowl is in Starkville.
Yeah. All right.
Why don't you do Arkansas now?
I'm going to do Arkansas. You requested Arkansas. In my mind, as soon as you said that, I'm like, all right, here we go. Here's my reminder. Dan Enos, Travis Williams. And then I was like, I'm just talking Mississippi State. I don't even care. I don't even care.
Here, let me dig it.
New fascinating thing. Arkansas is Mississippi State.
We're up to 21 points of fascination.
Yeah.
KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
That in and of itself is a ding.
Sure.
Probably the best returning quarterback and running back
in
the whole conference. Certainly the best returning tandem in the SEC. That is your starting point on offense.
Yeah.
The question is, Sam Pittman, offensive line guru, does he have what it takes to kind of reconstitute this line? And Arkansas had some real issues on defense last year that they need to sort out, especially against the schedule that they've got in front of them. They're over under 7. I mentioned the crazy stretch before. I'll just repeat it again. At LSU, Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, and then Mississippi State. You took it from Mississippi State, but let's play it back in reverse if we can on the Arkansas side.
Sure.
The over-under is 7. How do you feel about that?
Ooh, not amazing, Ty.
Yeah.
Not amazing as it relates to an over because they had half an offensive line, which is very rare last year. Generally, if you have a good offensive line, you have a good offensive line. They opened up holes for Rocket Sanders. They did a ton of great things for this rushing attack. They got push. They couldn't protect KJ Jefferson.
No.
They just couldn't. And I know he was beat up at times, but they were one of the absolute worst teams that pressure is allowed, sacks allowed in the country. And so, yes, you give Sam Pittman the benefit of the doubt in terms of you'd say reconstituting, right? Getting this offensive line to a better place.
15-cent word for you.
Yeah, that was pretty good, Ty. I admire that. But with how they're starting over at receiver on a certain level because I think Rocket Sanders is their leading returning receiver, I believe. No. And that it's a more, in the same way that Mississippi State, what they're trying to do, it's not as much like Kendall Briles is off to TCU. And so Dan Enos is more under center. He's more rollout, more pro concepts, heavier personnel packages that I think Arkansas is going to lean into what it does well, which should be running the ball with Rocket Sanders. And so I think they're going to continue to pursue that chunkiness, which is, it's Sam Pittman ball. I'm sure that's his preferred modus operandi. Is that the term, right?
The MO. You can just say MO.
Yeah.
I had to look up, by the way, what MO stood for.
I think it's modus operandi. I think
it does. I had to look that up like a year ago, which I'm not proud of, but
that's okay.
Continue.
This is a safe space. And they were just horrendous last year stopping the pass. And they're down their best defensive player in Drew Sanders. And so they hit the portal extremely hard. And it's not risky guys, but it's a lot of interesting ceilings, but unproven guys at major places like LSU and Pitt. I am worried with this schedule. Like, this would have been a nice year to have been in a different conference for Arkansas to sort of regain their footing and dealing with two new coordinators with Barry Odom off to UNLV, bringing in Travis Williams, who did pretty good stuff at UCF. I think he's a good hire, a younger defensive mind. The lack of star power on defense, coupled with a new offense, coupled with new receiver, and the schedule, it's too much new. And kind of what we talked about with Louisville, there's too much new with Arkansas. I think the offensive line will improve. I think KJ Jefferson will remain very, very good. You need winter wonder types, guys that are January level players to win in the SEC West. And I don't think Arkansas has enough of them in this moment.
Why don't we stick in the SEC West and close things out then?
Okay.
We've got one team
I
left.
just want to talk
Auburn.
Mississippi State again.
No, it's Auburn.
I know.
It's Auburn. Auburn's got a new coach, Hugh Freeze. You all remember that crazy guy?
Yep.
6.5 over under. It is a super interesting schedule in that it's got maybe the most interesting stretch. It'll be tough. And I think Arkansas maybe has a tougher stretch, but Auburn goes to A&M. They're back home against Georgia. Then they're on a bye. Then they're to LSU. Then they're back home against Ole Miss,
Right.
which is Hugh Freeze's former team, which will be kind of interesting. They do have UMass, Cal, and Sanford to start the season, which kind of gives them a chance to soft launch this new offense and get their new schemes up and running. But it toughens up in a hurry. And I don't know where Auburn is at in terms of roster construction. I know Hugh Freeze has done a pretty good job bringing in new talent. And I'm still very unsure about the quarterback position. My hunch is that Auburn will probably be a little bit better than you might expect looking at that over-under.
Yep.
But it's really just a function of the schedule making things really, really difficult to get too much traction and go above, 7 wins at most. Does that seem fair to you?
I think so. Defense is interesting to me, though, because I like Ron Roberts as a defensive coordinator. It was down last year for Baylor. I think Philip Montgomery, it's always sort of tricky when you go from head coach back to coordinator. Like, are you ascending still as an offensive mind? I hope so, because he's obviously been the co-architect of a lot of interesting offenses going back to his time at Baylor. Man, I don't know. You're talking about a Peyton Thorne, Robbie Ashford competition. You're talking about an offensive line that got a little bit better last year, but is thin once again. Lack of receiver. Jarquez Hunter's under investigation for an illicit tape. And his status is up in the air, because that was one of the things that you could sort of bank on with Auburn moving forward, right? Tank Bigsby gone, Jarquez Hunter coming back after having a really nice year in 2022. There's so much new on defense. I think it was like 10 defensive line transfers, something like that there should be some depth. It's an interesting defense at the moment, but it's a defense that's starting over in so many different places that you could tell me Auburn wins 9, you could tell me Auburn wins 4, and you could justify it pretty easily right now in this moment. So I think the fascinating thing about Auburn is not will they succeed. I think they will be a successful program. It's just which position group pops, which transfers pop. They're recruiting really, really well right now, which should come as no surprise. Hugh Freeze is a very good recruiter. They're going head-to-head and winning battles against top schools. It's just right now with so much new, where is Auburn going to succeed immediately, if anywhere? Like by week 7 or 8, maybe it becomes interesting on defense and they're locking teams down. They got great play out of their secondary last year. There was a lot of fight in Auburn after obviously parting ways with Brian Harsin into the season. But man, I don't see obvious star power anywhere on this team as a group. There's a couple guys here and there, but to me, it's just, what do they actually look like? What is the actual plan here?
I mean, I think that's a really fair place to be with Auburn. One of the things I know I called out on one of our previous previews was many of the preview publications will do the thing where they put the matrix up and they go position group by position group and they rank each relative to their peers
right
in their conference. And what I found across the board, not just one publication, but a couple of them, put Auburn very much near the bottom of the pack in most places.
Yeah.
Quarterback, linebacker, defensive line. The things that are most troubling are, of course, the trenches in the SEC, but you get the point. This is a roster that is being rebuilt in Hugh Freeze's image. Mm-hmm. And, love or hate the guy, as you said, he's a pretty talented recruiter. He's proven that he can do that at multiple stops. It's just not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to be something that takes a while. And I don't think it happens this year with some of the names that I've seen at quarterback. I'm probably not as low on Robbie Ashford as a lot. I think he showed some promise in action last season. I'm certainly not high on Peyton Thorne, but I just think it'll take time.
Yeah.
And I hope Auburn people will give Hugh Freeze the time. I hope Hugh Freeze is kind of a different and changed man kind of this time through. And 6.5 feels right.
My revision is I think the secondary will be quite good. I really do think it's just hard to – I like building a defense from the outside in, but I still think in the SEC you're going to need a good roster of talent up front to compete if you want to get back to the place where Auburn expects to get back, which is Atlanta every early December.
Let's go back to the East and let's round things out. We got 3 teams left here. We've got Mizzou, we've got Florida, and we've got Vandy. Where do you want to start?
Let's go Florida.
Ooh, Florida.
I don't know if I'm fascinated by Florida, but I definitely want to get them out of the way.
There's a lot of meat on the bone with Florida. We're at 26
there's interesting
points
things
here.
Yeah.
26 points is what I've got arbitrarily. Florida was 6-7 overall last season. 6-6 regular season, lost the bowl to Oregon State. Florida's over-under is 5.5 this season, which if you are an avid fan of college football, you hear that and you're kind of vexed by that. You know, your eyebrows go up a little bit when you hear 5.5.
Right.
Really? The most fascinating thing about Florida this season, I think, is the macro versus the micro. The bigger picture, zoomed out view of this program is I think that Billy Napier is trying to turn around an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
And it is not something that you can do quickly. It is going to take time because Dan Mullen was basically asleep at the wheel, at least in the recruiting
As
game.
a recruiter, yeah, which do they have like the number 3 current like class in 2024? Yeah.
It's up there. I haven't seen the exact ranking, but it's top 5.
Yeah.
It's top 5. Billy Napier is doing a very, very good job in this department, but it is just not going to be the kind of thing that he can do with the snap of a finger. It's going to take some time. On paper, this season, I think looks like rock bottom. This looks like the bottom of the barrel when everything from this point forward starts to trend in a better direction. That is the macro view. Now, the SEC is not necessarily a conference for macro fans, okay?
Right.
Everything is very contained to the season. And if you don't meet expectations, and if they don't meet expectations this season, on the heels of not meeting them last season, will there be more cries to try and, I don't know, change the coach? I hope not. I don't think so. I think Florida fans are more reasoned, but it is the SEC and stranger things have happened. On the more micro level, which is what we are here to talk about.
Yeah, Graham Mertz's quarterback rating. Yeah.
Graham Mertz is quarterback. And he's playing behind a line that's got 4 new starters. He's got a receiving core with 3 of its top 5 gone. I like the running backs, as you called out, right? Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, both very solid at running back. I suppose they will be the focal point of this offense, unless Graham Mertz is reborn. I still have hope he can get back to the guy who threw 5 touchdowns against Illinois.
Stop. You were banned from invoking that game time. You were banned. The records were destroyed.
That quarterback is still in him.
There was a very specific fire in a building in Rosemont, Illinois. The Big Ten HQ lost all recordings of that moment.
It just doesn't feel like an offense with a lot of pop to me.
Okay.
I like the running back room, but that's kind of it. I don't like Graham Mertz as the quarterback who can step in and kind of take this offense to new heights. I think this is a transition year.
Okay.
Is what this is. Defensively, it's a new coordinator in Austin Armstrong. They poached him from Bama. This was another one of those deals where he was there for a few days and then he wasn't. He is the youngest coordinator in major college football, 29 years old, which makes us feel really old now, Dan.
Hold on. A 29-year-old was born, some quick math here, 94?
4? Yeah.
So wasn't around for the Barcelona Olympics and the Dream Team. Continue. God, we're old.
Across the board, this is a young defense. And so maybe it's fitting that they've got a really young defensive coordinator to lead them into battle. I think what you see by and large with most of these young defenses that have a ton of talent, they're still trying to assemble them into a cohesive group. You see flashes some weeks and not others.
Yeah.
And mistakes, and hopefully you see improvement throughout the course of the season. I'm encouraged by the talent. Starting with this level of talent on defense is a good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be this year's or the next Shamar James is like the type of question you start asking. Who is going to pop this year like he popped last year as a freshman at linebacker?
Yeah.
That's the question for me across the board. The point of fascination, we'll dig in again. Shamar James. I'll just name drop. Why not?
That's fine.
I know names. I'm a podcaster.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with this team. This is a team that is very, very, very much still in transition. And it's going to take a little bit for the talent to get there. It's going to take a little bit for this whole project to start bearing fruit for Billy Napier. But I do believe he is the guy. I believe he is the right guy for this project.
Okay.
Because he has done a really good job in the recruiting game. I was not sure last season. I was not sure in the early part of the offseason. And the quarterback thing is still very confusing to me that he couldn't do better than Graham Mertz. Unless he sees something that nobody else saw. And if he did, good on him.
Okay.
That part to me is a little bit confounding. However, everything else has been very positive. All of the underlying signals here are that the Florida project will be in due time. Maybe next year we will see a big jump forward. Maybe it'll take 2 years, but it seems as if it is trending in a very good direction. Billy Napier has been a guy who, in his time with what we saw at Louisiana, he was able to develop players. He was able to build a good defense. He was able to build a team in the way that you want to build a team, that it is built for the long haul. So I still have faith in him. The schedule's brutal, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll play it.
It's brutal out here.
I just found the sound.
I appreciate it. It's Utah week 1 in Salt Lake.
It is Utah week 1 in Salt Lake. I count 3 wins, 3 surefire wins, let me say.
Okay.
3 surefire wins. I think this is a 5-7 team.
Damn. Wow.
And that is a reversal for me, because when we did the schedule preview, I said 5.5, give me the over. It's Florida. What could happen? Give me the over. This is a 5-7 team. Florida has a tough game every odd numbered week. Another ding. Every odd numbered week, they have a tough game. Week 1, open at Utah. 2 weeks later, it's home against Tennessee. 2 weeks later, they're at Kentucky. Then they're at South Carolina 2 weeks later. Then after that, 2 weeks, it's Georgia, the Georgia game, obviously very tough.
Yeah.
2 weeks later at LSU. 2 weeks later, they close out the year with Florida State. Also,
home,
they've got
at home,
Arkansas.
right? Florida
at
State's
home.
in Gainesville. Yeah.
Florida State's in Gainesville. Also, they've got Arkansas in a letdown look-ahead spot in between Georgia and LSU. 2 teams, obviously, that we think will be contenders. So Florida is really getting the worst of everything this year, because they are in a transition with their talent and trying to assemble the masses. They also have just a brutal schedule. This is tough no matter who it is. 5-7.
5-7. There's your Florida fascination. All right. Let's go Vandy, because you know what? I think it's rude to finish with Vandy after beating Florida and Kentucky. Yes, last year.
5-7 last year, and
Hell
they're
yeah.
over under. They're over unders 3.5 now. My point of fascination is that over under.
Yeah.
It is specifically that over under, because Vandy has a lot back on both sides of the ball. The entire offensive line is back,
Mm-hmm.
and they start with 4 winnable games in Hawaii, Alabama A&M, Wake Forest, and UNLV.
Yes.
There is a chance that Vandy wins all 4 of those games and hits the over through
Certainly.
the first 4 weeks of the season. I could also see him pushing a team like Mizzou, maybe Auburn, maybe South Carolina. Getting to 4 wins seems very, very doable, if you ask me. So I'm on the over Vanderbilt. I've been putting out these tweets on our social accounts asking people, who's your bet? Who are you picking in the Pac-12 and the Big 12, whatever. Vandy's probably my pick in the SEC. I feel pretty good about that over. Defensively, the line is very deep, which is not something I'm used to saying about Vanderbilt football, but Clark Lee has done a really good job beefing up that side of things, which of course we know you need to do if you're playing in the SEC.
That deep line was responsible for the 125th best pressure rate last year.
94th overall defense in the SP+.
Yeah.
So this is not to imply that they were good last season.
Yeah,
I think
they're older.
I think they're older. Another year. Clark Lee is I think we respect him as a defensive guy.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think they will be better on that side of the ball. AJ Swan is now definitively the quarterback. He might be limited by the defense on the other side, putting him in bad situations, having to play from behind. Maybe he'll put up numbers, maybe he won't. But I just feel better about this Vandy team than I did a season ago. I don't know if they win more than 5 games, probably not. But over 3.5 feels pretty good to me. They have that really conducive stretch in the beginning part of the season that makes me feel good about that over. So that's where I'm at with Vandy. I think they could be better, but the record could be worse.
All right, fair enough. You know where Vandy really needs to improve? I mean, aside from everywhere, one of the places that you didn't mention, Vandy's like a school that is primed to just like, can you throw a bunch of money at special teams? They had terrible special teams last year. Can you throw a bunch of effort at finding a great kicker and being the best kickoff coverage team and punt coverage team and focus energy? Like, it sounds sort of defeatist, but I think one of those things where when you go from 3 to 7 wins, you need to hit on every margin. And that to me is, especially with an up and down, you're kind of neutral, if not a little bit down on South Carolina and Florida, and certainly like a Kentucky offense that is very much in need of rejuvenation. Like you're going to finish with Mizzou right now. Like, there are wins to be had. And the way that you can absolutely secure those wins is not screwing up on special teams.
In Shane Beamer's first season for South Carolina.
Right. It's a great example.
Beamer ball is known for its aptitude on special teams.
Yeah.
They went from 80th in special teams SP plus all the way up to 9th in his first season. Last season, they were number 1.
Number 1. Saw that.
Number 1. So they've improved both seasons. There's nowhere to go but down for Shane Beamer this season. But obviously, as a special teams coach himself and somebody who comes from that lineage, he knows how to coach special teams, and that is one way you can make up those margins.
When you're sitting on a lead that doesn't come super frequently, and you punt the ball back to a team's own 27 and you tackle them at the 29, that's incredible. That you need to force them to go 71 yards. When you give up a 38-yard punt return in that spot, that means you are trying to lose. And so that's where I think there are, along the margin, places where a lot of these teams, you mentioned Arizona, that have had these like super duper down years, throw a little extra energy at special teams to secure 4 instead of 2, 6 instead of 3, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, one other point there on the South Carolina front. They were 16th and 15th, respectively, in offensive and defensive starting field position. Mm-hmm. And that is a function, to some extent, of special teams.
Yes, the hidden yards.
Vanderbilt did not have that.
Vanderbilt
was much, much farther down on that ladder. So a lot to improve. Look, this is always going to be a long-term project. We know Clark Lee really wanted that Vandy job, which is awesome. It's awesome to have somebody there who doesn't necessarily view it as a stepping stone.
No.
Not to say he couldn't go elsewhere, but we know he really wanted that job.
Of course.
And the fact that he's got it now and that he's done what he's done in a very short period of time at Vandy, I think is really exciting. But it's a tough road there. I'm still on the over, though.
Okay.
I'm still in the over.
I think I am too. Continue.
Close things out with Mizzou.
All right.
We're up to point number, 29, let's say.
Yeah.
My question for Mizzou is, I wrote this down. I'm reading this verbatim. Will the real Mizzou offense please stand up?
Don't do that. That's a reference from 1998.
We're 90s kids, man. That's what we are.
The reference is barely older than Austin Armstrong, Ty.
Austin Armstrong's listening to this. Like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
Yeah.
Eli Drinkwitz had the reputation as the offensive guru, and we just haven't seen that magic.
Mm-hmm. Barely younger, I should say, reference. Continue.
We haven't seen that magic from Eli Drinkwitz.
No.
And we still don't really know what the philosophy of this offense is or what it's supposed to be. And they've got a good receiver room this season.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a good line. I'm not frightened by any home run hitters in the backfield. Also, the quarterback situation kind of feels like a mess.
Yep.
So the coach, Eli Drinkwitz, has been calling the offense. Now he hired an offensive coordinator to help establish an identity. It's Kirby Moore, who I just learned is the younger brother of Kellen Moore.
Oh, okay.
Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Kirby Moore, who was at Fresno, was the younger brother and played receiver for Boise and is obviously in the in the bright coaching family that is the Kellen Moore, Kirby Moore thing.
Yeah.
He said they want to play with more tempo. It's unclear to me what that scheme looks like for Mizzou. Brady Cook, per Eli Drinkwitz, has opened camp as the number 1 quarterback. Eli Drinkwitz is also very careful to not give the job to Brady Cook, which probably tickled many Mizzou fans pink, because I don't think most of them want Brady Cook to be the starter.
Yeah.
I think they'd rather it be Sam Horn. I think they'd rather it be Jake Garcia, but I think everybody's got a fairly clear idea of what the Brady Cook ceiling looks like, and it's time to go a different direction. But who knows? Who knows? He does have a lot of experience. There were moments where Brady Cook looked pretty good, but it just feels to me like maybe Sam Horn's a better option at this point. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, fair enough.
That's where I'm at. I think the defense, though, will be lights out. The defense will be good. The defense was a top 20 unit in the SP Plus last season. I think more gains this season. My problem really with Mizzou is the over-under 6.5. I don't see 7 wins. I could possibly believe in 6 wins after a few drinks, but 7 wins, dog, ain't happening.
Oh,
I'm going
dog.
under.
Okay.
Under Mizzou, because I don't believe in the offensive identity. Maybe Kirby Moore can get him there, but I don't believe that they've got the manpower to really take any big strides on offense. And it's a tough schedule. It's a tough schedule.
Fresno's offense was more about efficiency than explosiveness last year, and so both good and bad. And Jake Hayner was hurt, but his numbers were very, very good in terms of developing as an efficient quarterback when healthy. Hopefully that rings true for Brady Cook or whoever is playing quarterback for Mizzou this year. But yeah, I think it's a decent starting place, with the big caveat being quarterback needs to work. Because if you have the receivers, if you have the defense, you mentioned somewhere around top 20 in the country, and I saw they were top 20 in points per drive allowed. So they're starting from a decent place. It's just everybody coming together. It's just a cohesion question.
And look, they've played hard for Eli Drinkwitz.
And they lose stupidly.
They lose stupidly, and they play hard. They find themselves in they were in a very interesting game against Georgia last year.
Of course.
One of those deals where you see it on the bottom line and you wonder, is there like a problem with the network that it didn't update?
Right.
Why is the score this close? And so they play for this guy. They really do. He's enthusiastic. I like him as a coach. I'm just waiting, and I wonder how long they're willing to wait for this offense to take flight. That just, he's proven that he can bring some talent to the equation, right?
Yeah.
He brought in big talent from the state of Missouri.
Yeah,
and
Luther
he's done
Burden, yeah.
Luther Burden, they're moving him to the slot. I mean, it could be a pretty good season for him.
Yeah.
And he's done a good job making it a bit of a transfer destination. He has been good at doing that. But as a consistent high school recruiter, getting this talent infused into the lineup has not been his specialty, and certainly getting this offense to a place of consistency has not been something he's done well with either.
Right.
I don't know. I'm out on Mizzou in terms of the over-under. I don't see them hitting 7 wins.
So your SEC championship game is between LSU and Georgia?
LSU and Georgia. I'm going Georgia.
I'm going to go Alabama, Georgia. And I'm going to go... I'm going to go Alabama. They beat them 2 years ago in this game with the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. I'm going to go Bama. It feels weirdly safe, even though Alabama's going through what they're going through in terms of offensive change, quarterback uncertainty, and not having the obvious on offense like they had, a short time ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Tommy Rees, successful. Why not?
That would be a story. Is Tyler Buckner the quarterback? I mean...
No. I don't think he is.
That's probably good.
I think he's a depth play.
Rees.
There it is. Ty, you're quick. You're in mid-season form here on the board.
I had to pull it up on the board. It takes a little bit to load it in.
Okay.
But you bought me efficient time. You vamped accordingly. 33 fascinating
Love
points for the SEC in 2023. That does it for our Power 5 conferences. We've still got Notre Dame. We still got the group of 5 that we're going to do next episode. Please make sure you hit subscribe. Please make sure you follow whatever your app of choice allows you to do. Also follow along on YouTube, where you can watch full episodes and also catch clips and shorts of all of these shows that we put together on a weekly ongoing basis. ForBallers.com is where you can play the game Grand Total. We also have other games that we're going to announce. We also have more benefit perks. We're redoing Patreon to an extent. We're going to make it all the more exciting for people who love the show and want to help support what Dan and I do. We will announce that very, very shortly. We promised you. I know we've been talking about it for a while, but we're just dotting some I's and crossing some T's to make it as good as it can be. That's where we're at.
I have nothing to add to this other than I wish I were going to a game at LSU this year. I miss that place.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, again, your 33 fascinating points about the SEC in 2023. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you all next episode. Stay solid.
Peace.
Grand total. You have to go through every FBS team. And no, I screwed that up every time.
You do. It's okay. Just go through it. Power through, Ty. Be
every
like
group of five team.
Be the
every
Mike
group of five
Allstott
team.
of information. And look, it's not always pretty, but just barrel through.
Every group of five team. I got it right. All 69.
No, Power 5. You were just on one today. Keep going. Don't cut this, Ty.
All 69 FBS teams? Power 5 teams? What are we doing?
5 teams? Oh, Ty.
We're gonna have to cut this.
No, you leave it in, Ty. You're good.
I'll leave this in for Patreon. This is
Okay.
what happens, okay?
Mm-hmm.